Right, how is everybody? Hanging on, doing well? Cool. I couldn't ask for a better lead-in than what Pamela has just spoken about, so I might touch on a couple of those points. So first up, are we doing this again? We're good? Right, okay. I'm Hollie Hynes, I'm the General Manager for Roads at Laing O'Rourke, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, both elders past, present and emerging. Today, I'd really love to give you an honest contractor's perspective on how industry must work together to decarbonise our supply chain, especially in readiness for the Olympics. And here's a hint, we can do it and we are ready. If we can go to this slide here. So first, a little around Laing O'Rourke. So we were founded in the United Kingdom and we're a $6 billion international operation. Australia is Laing O'Rourke's second largest geography, with more than 70 years of involvement in the local construction and infrastructure market and more than a decade under the Laing O'Rourke banner. To the next slide, please. Our global mission is to become the recognised leader for innovation and excellence in the construction industry. And that's a mission that, to me, is inherently sustainable. It's about doing things better and about continuing to challenge the norm. And it's a mission that we take seriously, one that we focus on and one that we fund. Here in Australia, and for context around what I'm talking about today, our key sectors are heavy infrastructure, so rail, defence, roads, resources, and buildings that are at a transport interface like overstation development works that come out of heavy infrastructure. Next slide, please. We have been on a long sustainability journey, so what I'm about to talk to isn't new. I can genuinely say this because from 2014 to 2018, I led the sustainability function for the company. And as an evolutionary step in our journey, we recently set and published some bold global net zero targets. And we are going to achieve operational net zero by 2030 and be a net zero company before 2050. And these are aligned to our mission, and we're quite proud of these. To break this down, though, to make sure everybody's completely across what we're talking about, this means that we'll deliver an absolute reduction in emissions from our directly controlled operations, scope 1 and 2, which is fuel and electricity on construction sites. So just think about that, the fuel being poured into big yellow pieces of kit in plant and generators all plugged into electricity to keep a site shed going. Also, we're going to become a net zero company before 2050. So that means we need to tackle scope 3, which is what I'm here to talk about today, which is essentially our supply chain emissions, and we are a part of the supply chain. These emissions relate to purchased materials in particular, and keep this in mind, concrete, steel and asphalt. So if we hold that in context, we're talking about 3 chunky things if we want to scale up and take a big bite of the elephant. Scope 1 accounts for roughly 4%, 2 for about 1%, and 3 for around 95%. So overlay that with those 3 products. To do this, we're working with our suppliers to embed scope 3 data capturing and reporting to get efficiency in data capture and scale up. A little what we were just talking about. Working with our strategic suppliers to develop emission reduction targets through their businesses. And get alignment between low and zero carbon products to our business. And we're supporting the delivery of our clients' net zero ambitions. So talking about what was just spoken about with Pamela through the wider use of our engineering carbon calculator, which is optimized through BIM. It looks at our 4D design, and we start to link little what Pamela was saying, our bill of quantities immediately through to a carbon calculation. And that way, touching on what Valentina said, we're looking at circular design and reduction strategies, because the best way to help with step 1 of reducing carbon is by having the leanest design as possible. But this is a commitment that Laing O'Rourke has made and is investing in to work towards our sustainability strategy and social responsibility position. And whilst I'm really proud of what we're doing, one company or many other companies working in silos is just not going to cut it at the pace and scale we need to move to get to a the 2050 state that we need to be in to reduce climate change impacts. But we're also here today talking about something that's happening in only 10 years' time, the Olympics. So if we can go to slide 4, talking with Monica and kind of ideation mode about what we were going to talk about today. For me, I kind of rambled that it was a story of 4 key parts, one with policy overarching. So for context, the Australian construction industry, especially in linear infrastructure, and thinking about the Olympics, we're talking about the roads, both state and local, rail, and some buildings, whether they're permanent, some structures, whether they're permanent or temporary. This is primarily achieved in Australia through a very, very disaggregated supply chain. Very few tier one contractors have a completely integrated solution in Australia due to geographical pressures. This means that the same construction company, us, can have preferred supply agreements with three companies talking about concrete that's accelerating a low carbon concrete in, I was going to say in Queensland, and then have to have three different ones again in another state. So at economies of scale is the risk. Within Queensland, we can have that in southeast Queensland and three totally different suppliers up in North Queensland because of the geographical conditions. Also, many contractors deliver this infrastructure are not national themselves. So many choose to just deliver within a couple of geographies. Very few are completely national. So that leveraging of economies of scales to accelerate that change and those innovations in the supply chain is really difficult. So what we're saying here is relying on a few early movers to scale up isn't the answer, and we need to all shift together, meaning the entire national supply chain needs to move at pace. So how do we do that? We need to get harmonisation of policy that goes to regulations, that goes to targets, so as that in any state, barring the specifics of geotechnical requirements or some certain specifics, we need to be able to do this, to be able to move at pace and to be able to move with economics as a foundation, meaning that the cost curve happens, that it's over and done with as quickly as possible so we can move past cost being a barrier. What else have I got to say? Our order book is heavily focused on linear and heavy infrastructure, which means most of our clients are government bodies. Without strong policy, our clients, we know, will have difficulty changing quickly, and it'll be hard to adopt bold targets. We've seen some fabulous examples from Transport in New South Wales, and I'm going to touch on that in a second. But the private sector can and does move faster in this space, especially in the building space, because there is policies and incentives at a global scale where buildings and those buildings that form asset portfolios are built more sustainably or retrofitted to maintain strong investment dollars or numbers. And the public sector must learn from this and catch up. So we all know the critical importance of policy, but in this context, it really is everything in order to shift the dial to move from conversation into action. So what that means is we must change the conversation around what value for money is. For so long, value for money is time, quality, and cost. And somehow we must get carbon in there to be not only equally weighted as the fourth dimension of 25% of the criteria, but also how it then impacts time, because we are so tight on program. How do we even get in with our clients to say, we've got this great idea, we've got this great opportunity in the supply chain? The program's already moved and we're rewarded on the tightest program. Quality, we've got specification issues. We've got this great product, we can buy it because we're incentivizing our supply chain because Laing O'Rourke wants to move our sustainability agenda, but our clients won't buy it because their specifications won't allow it. We can't lay that concrete or use that steel. And cost, there's going to be that cost curve for that first innovation piece unless we move at scale, or unless we actually start to mandate this and get through that cost curve quickly. There needs to be recognition and understanding there will be a cost curve involved in this, no different to any innovation that we've ever seen in the past. It's kind of economics 101. So absolutely redefining the concept of value for money is perhaps the most critical thing we can do here. And I want you to imagine for a second, if decarbonisation and circular economy was a key criteria to client decision making, let's think Queensland, let's think Brisbane City Council and TMR, leading up to every asset that needs to be built between now and the Olympics. If it was a heavily weighted criteria, decarbonisation and circular economy, it would change the entire mindset of how we go to work. To my knowledge, no one has ever had feedback in a public infrastructure year that they completely lost a job based on carbon or a lack of carbon initiative. But we've all had feedback, every single one of us, that we've lost a job on cost or time, or an innovation that didn't save cost or time. I raise this purely as food for thought, and with the race that we're well and truly into to stop climate change, we must ask ourselves, how do we shift that paradigm? And for me, it's value for money conversation. and that harmonisation of policy, because we're talking about Queensland, but this is not only a national problem we're trying to solve, but a global problem we're trying to solve. So state lines shouldn't change away from local specific geotech issues. Right, moving to the green box. I said this was a story of 4 parts, policy being overarching. The next 3 pillars that sit underneath that for me, although it's not completely clear on here, is supply chain innovation. We've got the supply chain that's ready to move. We're a smart industry, we can do this. Clients moving with and preferably ahead of the change by matching their acceptability to these innovations with specification and type approvals. So not waiting for industry to have to come up with the ideas, but working with industry to move towards what these specifications can be, and ensuring that the contracting mechanisms, so this is how we actually do it, are collaborative and ensure that all current roadblocks to change are removed. We are in a phenomenally low margin industry. To ask contractors and supply chain to take on risk around trying to accelerate the decarbonisation of a global problem is just not, it's the biggest blocker to change that we currently have at the moment. So not winning a job because we've priced something that's a fabulous opportunity in is one issue, but then asking people to take on risk by saying, oh, you came up with a great idea here, now go and make it happen, but we don't get the type approval in time, or we don't get something happen in time, and we've got to take on that risk is the next barrier to change. From a supply chain point of view, just back to that, as I said, we've got this dispersed supply chain. We need to redefine that value for money. A lot of these companies need front-end funding as well. They're not, they're small to medium enterprises, or in some cases, big companies that are in a small geographical area that are ready to scale up. They need front-end funding, and collaborative contracting really does help this, because as the conduit to our supply chain or the supply chain, we can work and figure out with our clients who needs what and how that can be scaled up. But in order for our supply chain to invest in their products and opportunities, they not only need front-end funding, but they need to know that repeat work is coming their way, and that there is a pipeline for them to be able to invest in and back their products and back themselves. And our current procurement processes do not allow for that. Probity shutters go up. We're not able to talk and discuss around what the options are, and the competitive process that we run to is kind of a tension against progress here. An example is Wagner's, and I hope they don't mind me talking about themselves, who I believe are in the room today, who have one of the best low carbon concretes in the country called Earth Friendly Concrete. They need our collective support to scale up their product and offering right now in industry. And this comes through a secured pipeline of work, potentially early cash flow to invest in their solutions. And Wagner's are a shining example of what's being done in our supply chain, but they're currently based in Queensland. We operate nationally. So I'm sure they can speak for themselves in a tick. Client drivers and specification movement. So industry needs that consistent approach to decarbonisation through clear policy, regulation and targets. And where it's at right now is it's disaggregated, and it differs from client to client, so much so that in some states we can have specifications approved for low carbon products in our region and not approved in another region because of opinions and because of a lack of willingness to change the status quo. Similarly, it's the same interstate as well. So I know this isn't going to be easy, but if we could just imagine if, us as industry could get together, stop working in silos and form a combined industry-led top-down effort to really realise this change at scale, because without scale, we're not going to achieve the time paradigm. And without that, we're going to fall at the hurdle of not only the Olympics, but the legacy that's there for 2050. So keeping our imagination hat on, if we harmonise asset owner technical specifications across our state of Queensland, we can see what New South Wales has done. It's a phenomenal example. I was going to raise it anyway. But let alone harmonising across the country, we'd be able to lift and accelerate this really quickly. I think I've given enough examples of where we do things in one state and it's not done in the other. But just if you can indulge me for a second on New South Wales and Victoria. New South Wales, not only is that great work being done that we just saw from Pamela, but in the metro projects, it can never be a set and forget. These are almost little science experiments that are happening with our supply chain that we need to get comfortable with in our assets. So what Metro is doing is, as a great idea or as a specification is accepted, the next contract that rolls out has that as the new minimum standard. So it needs to continue to evolve, or else it's never going to be taken up at scale. Early adopters won't come in and justify the spend from the initial innovator, and that whole kind of innovation and cost curve will just drag out, cost more, and you will always have somebody arguing that it's an economic imperative to spend less versus change for climate action. So minimum standards, they need to evolve. It can't just be a set and forget, and we need to learn, consolidate, share knowledge and set those benchmarks. And think about this again, we're talking majority here, concrete, asphalt and steel. There are many other products, I'm not going to deny that, but they are three big areas that if we could harmonise across the country, across our states, encourage innovation, reward that innovation, front end some of this work that's being done by smaller companies to solve global problems, and reward through changing the value for money conversation, we will move the dial at the speed that we need to move it. Look, I was going to jump into a lot more. I think I've probably made all the points that I want to, but I will finish by saying the Olympics. Imagine the right policy, the right procurement and contracting models, and the right minimum standards and targets for decarbonisation. It would provide a fantastic platform for us to build upon in the lead up to 2032 Olympics. It would mean not only achieving a world first carbon positive Olympic Games, but a legacy well into the future that will act as a blueprint for how we accelerate towards 2050, a world in which carbon emissions have been eliminated, the current climate change projections halted, and a healthier, more sustainable planet for us to grow old in and our future generations to enjoy for many years to come. The time is now. Thank you.